all of us have a common assignment of collecting a final portfolio. I don't think that in a PWG group there would always need to be a common assignment. For example, it might be interesting to see what someone from a different department, without being immersed in the jargon that we get accustomed to in our own discipline, what somebody from another department would make of what they're being asked to do. What you see here is the actual tuning protocol that we usually modify in some way to different tuning protocols, and the part that you'll see next is where Sophie explains sort of the history of her assignment.
This is the set of instructions I used last semester, and I'm interested in improving it.
After we heard Sophie explain her assignment, we had the chance to ask some clarifying questions, and then we take about 15 minutes or so to read the work and make notes as we read. It's usually pretty important that we don't try to look at too much text. The protocols are really meant to help us slow down and look closely, so I think.
And it's sort of related goal in terms of streamlining it and handing over more of the intellectual work to them is to make the document have more overall coherence. Now I feel like I've really chopped it into bits and it doesn't come together necessarily.
Participants share feedback with each other while the presenter is silent. The feedback generally begins with a few minutes of warm feedback, moves on to a few minutes of cool feedback.
I guess I can start. One thing I notice, I feel like the handout, though long, is really well organized. So.
So my favorite part of this whole entire document is actually there's two areas. Number one will be the way you describe the content of the final portfolio, the first page. It really gives me a sense of what exactly was happening in your course.
Maybe discover something that they didn't know they were working on, and that really impressed me.
Makes me think of a couple things at once. One would be early in the semester how the students would have goals that I wouldn't think are good goals. Things like improve my grammar. I write a lot of sentence fragments. I want to stop doing that.
Right.
And we often want to think. So it makes me think about that, and that makes me wonder about like how do they come up with the goals in Sophie's class. And then it also makes real sense to me that I'm at a point, at mid-semester, where there could be email conversations, online conversations, or conferences where the conference kind of ends with talking about what these goals would be. Just something really useful that I could probably take into my classroom, should take into my classroom.
Yeah, that was a stealing moment. I was like, yeah.
So the next part is where we're supposed to move to cool feedback, which might rise up out of saying what Sophie hoped for this document and where she sees it not meeting those goals. Sorry, no, go ahead. You go, Sharon. Go ahead.
The how to assemble your final portfolio. I started feeling a little bit overwhelmed as I was reading it about the PV.
Because I had a similar impression when I first read this particular section, how to assemble your final portfolio. When I first saw at first glance, it was overwhelming, and it made me wonder, as a student, let's say if I was a student in your class, it would make me wonder how much time do I have left, and it gave me an impression that there's a lot of work that I need to do.
And if she thinks it's dull, I don't know, that would be a question for Sophie, like what was so dull about them? I can sort of see people following the how-to and they all read the same and thus they're dull. But if I'm starting with the idea of my book, the books maybe I think are different.
I wonder if, and I realized I was writing, making comment on here, and I forgot to bring it up. But I wonder if this particular portion, the assembling part, can happen in class. Almost key for me to feel, what's the word?
Interested?
Interested. Or excited.
Yeah.
It does. So,
We should probably,
I
it's,
really enjoy
we're on about,
Should go.
it's 1:15, so we
Oh,
should
okay.
probably go to see if Sophie has any sort of reflection items, and I'll read the bullet real quick. The presenter speaks to those comments or questions he or she chooses while participants are silent. This is not a time to defend oneself, but instead a time for the presenter to reflect aloud on those ideas or questions that seem particularly interesting.
Let's see. I thought about the question that you guys ended with, like, is there interesting reflective writing on one's writing? Like,